Today is going to be a very passionate conversation as we dive into one of the most passionate zodiac signs, Scorpio, and the essential oils that help them. So, here are our best aromatherapy tips for bringing out the passion in Scorpios and also making sure that we don't overdo it with the passion as well. Joining me is the very, very passionate Liz. How are you today, Liz?
I'm not sure that passionate's a word that would describe me, but I'm okay, thank you.
A very passionate answer indeed. Now, often signs like Leo or the fire signs are kind of associated with passion, but I think Scorpios can really rival and compete in this realm. However, whereas a Leo might want to be the star of a stage production, I think Scorpios, they want to be the director or the producer. They don't necessarily need all the attention, but they do like to be in control. And I think control could be an aspect that, or a word that kind of comes up a lot today. But do you have many Scorpios in your life?
One of my best friends is a Scorpio, but that's it really. I don't think there has never been that many in my life. No.
Well, my father and my best friend are both Scorpios. Very different people. Scorpios are renowned for kind of being, oh, don't upset a Scorpio. They'll, that scorpion will sting you. But one thing that I do notice about Scorpios, loyal to the bone, aren't they? I know if I was somewhere in the world, if I needed help, my Scorpio friend would drop everything and be there for me. And, as long as you don't betray that trust, they're there for life, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. And that sort of scorpion and the sting in the tail, to me, seems a bit unkind. I don't see them like that at all.
Yeah. Oh, well, piss one off, and you definitely will see that come up for sure. But let's celebrate some of their beautiful parts. Scorpios are a water sign, and they're really beautifully like to go into the depths of the water. Whereas, Pisces, that we'll talk about later on, is very much kind of like swimming around in the ocean, and Cancers are that beautiful kind of nurturing pond. The depths and going almost where you can't see light is where Scorpio likes to go. Hello, Lamira. As we dive through Scorpio, what you're going to find is they're not into the small talk. They're the sign of psychology, of sexuality. Traditionally, Scorpio rules sex, death, and taxes. The three things we either don't want to talk about, are taboo, or we avoid. And Scorpio likes to go there. So if you do have a Scorpio in their life, try to avoid that small talk because they really want to kind of get around that and go really deep. And you may find Scorpios don't have a lot of friends purely for that reason. Sorry, whatever my cat is. Purely for that reason that they want people of depth rather than just having a whole bunch of friends as well. For this idea of wanting to go deep and wanting to go authentic, this is where I love black pepper. We did talk about black pepper last week a little bit with the Librans, but I find it so good for the Scorpios as well. They want the truth. They want the authenticity. And black pepper is that. We use black pepper therapeutically on a physically level for helping us get rid of bad habits. It's probably my premier oil I'd recommend for someone who's trying to give up a habit such as smoking. And I find on a deeper level, black pepper is really good for helping you get rid of habits or inauthenticities within yourself as well. So, as a Scorpio ruled by Pluto, wanting to get rid of all the trivialities, the toxicity, and the fakeness, black pepper really complements that.
Now, to reply to that, I think I can't match it like logically at all to what you say, but as you say, like it feels right. It feels like a Scorpio, or it feels like it's got that heat in it. It feels like it has that authenticity in it. I, yeah, I think I can't argue it or say yes or no either way.
Well, the other oil that's also kind of I call an oil of the darkness, and remember that in the shadows is kind of where Scorpios tend to like to explore. They like sometimes they're renowned for liking a bit of gossip or unknown or conspiracy theories or true crime and murder mysteries, all that type of thing is very Scorpionic. I find juniper berry to be really great as well. Remember, black pepper and juniper berry are both fruits, so they're transformational. They bring on transmutation, and juniper berry is so good for helping us face our fears, face the unknown, go into the darkness, because that's where the true treasure is, deep, deep in the cave. So that's another one that I really strongly attribute to bringing out that delving deep and doing the deep work, the shadow work and the unknown work, the mystery, the occult that is very much associated with that Scorpio energy.
Yeah, 100% agree. The Pluto, of course, is or Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, and Pluto is the ruler of the underworld. So this idea that they kind of go deep into the shadows is a big part of their archetype. And whenever you're doing that kind of work, to like stave off negative energies, there's sort of a variety of oils that you would use, but juniper is always up there. And I think, yeah, it has like this astringent quality that makes them feel very clear of everything else. Like they're not taking other people's stuff on. They can just think very clearly, feel like they can authentically do what they want to do without worrying about other people. Yeah.
Mm. Now, in relationships, whereas we talked about Libra last week, and probably all their relationships are rather grey because they're making sure everyone is happy. I find Scorpios do have that real integrity on what their boundaries are. They have really strong boundaries in their relationships, and I've found loyal to a T, but also once you've crossed the line too much, you're gone. And they are renowned, some Scorpio energy, when it comes out of balance, when it's a bit kind of too vengeful, they can be really, they're dangerous to be around because they will want to make sure that you pay for what they see as a wrongdoing. When that anger does start to percolate, and it will be more of a volcano. Pluto is quite volcanic, and it's almost like it brews underneath. And we want to make sure that they use that passion that they have not in a destructive way, but in a positive way. And whenever I need to transmute angry, fiery energy, I reach straight for cardamom. Cardamom in the body, we use it to help us breathe and get that breathing easier. We use it for digestion to help us digest better. We use it in massage to help with circulation as well. So when that fire energy is like that bubbling volcano and needs to explode, cardamom helps us turn anger into passion and into constructive passion. So I think if you're dealing with a Scorpio who is a little bit angry and is seeking revenge, maybe we need to lean in and sneak in a little bit of cardamom to calm them down in one way or another.
Yeah, agree again. The other oil that I would think of for that kind of aspect of them, and I agree that is a potent part, would be yarrow. That very, very cooling, soothing aspect. Interestingly, you're talking about the sort of the Scorpio swiping the tail thing. A lot of the mythology about sweet basil is about how scorpions grow come from basil. You look at the medieval text, and it'll be like where basil grows, scorpions birth from the basil, and it's always like this sort of meshing of mythology. So I think the other side of things is I'm skipping forward really, but when we get to the medical astrology, a big part of Scorpio's problem is that they suppress their emotions. And so while you're talking about the fact that they always blow up, it's good that they blow up because that's their archetype. But if they don't, and you think, right, okay, I do need to like detonate a few bombs, then sweet basil is really good for that. It really brings out that Scorpio bang. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say probably just to kind of clarify, they're probably not explosive where they're going to start yelling and screaming, but they will percolate. That kind of saying that revenge is a dish best served cold is probably kind of that Scorpio energy. They'll wait and they'll do things in the background, but in that, they're holding on to those hot coals. They're burning themselves. They're drinking their own poison in that way. So, yeah, maybe basil could be really great in that way. Another oil that has a bit of a connection to Pluto that could be good for this kind of when they need to cool down are the mints, peppermint. Remember that Pluto was having a little fling with the nymph Mentha, and then Persephone found out and stamped on Mentha and turned her into the mint plant. And so there is that kind of cooling aspect of Pluto being out in the far reaches of our solar system and in that mythology as well. So you could bring in some of the mints for cooling down a Scorpio as well as another suggestion. The final oil that I think is really great is vetiver. And vetiver kind of has a twofold effect that I think is really great for Scorpio. First of all, vetiver, when we work with vetiver, it removes toxicity. And I remember when we did a big dive into the vetiver video, you talked about how vetiver is planted in different parts around the world to remove toxicity out of the environment. So it's really great in that respect. Secondly, it will calm an angry Scorpio or a vengeful Scorpio, but also when we repress and when we don't acknowledge our emotions, that can cause a whole bunch of havoc, which I get a feeling you're going to expand on in a moment. But meditation with vetiver helps us get to the root of an issue. So anyone who has a lot of scorpionic energy and kind of feels restless or annoyed but doesn't quite know why, I would really encourage you to start working with vetiver a bit more. Just sitting with it. It's an oil of stillness. That's its gift. Helps you to be still, to work out what that toxicity is, what the root of this upset is. Is it that someone else is upsetting you, or is it that you're upset with yourself in one way or another? And so when Scorpios are feeling out of whack, feeling restless, and they don't know why, when there's agitation, I'd go cardamom for the anger or the fury or the revenge. But when it's restless or tormented, I'd go with vetiver.
Yeah, actually, as an archetype, anything to do with Pluto, you would say the roots because they belong under the earth, like Pluto is under the earth. So, as you quite rightly say, vetiver, but turmeric, ginger, spikenard, all of those ones that sort of have got this really deep like vibration to them. They can all be very helpful to the Scorpio archetype.
Sorry to interrupt for just a moment. I hope you're enjoying this episode of Sixth Sense. Now, you're probably getting rather excited about essential oils, and you might be tempted to go out and just grab some. But did you know the essential oil world is not regulated, and a lot of what it says on the label is not governed by anyone? A fun fact, which is not so fun, is that 75% of all oils that are sold as pure, natural, or organic lavender are not even from a plant. So how do you know what's real? Well, I went looking for that question a long time ago, and I found doTERRA to be a really reliable source of high-quality essential oils. They don't just test their oils themselves, but at the end of the process, they have an independent third party verify and double-check their oils to make sure that you are getting what nature intended purely from the plant. They also source where nature intended the plants to grow as well. If you want to grab hold of some essential oils from doTERRA, then I offer a discount code, and this is available no matter where you are in the world. Now, I don't want everyone to get essential oils. I want everyone to use essential oils. So when you become one of my customers, you get access to me and my VIP education platforms, ongoing discounts, ongoing freebies, live classes in all time zones all around the world, and so much more. So if you're interested in getting some essential oils that you know are really from nature, and this is important not only physically, but metaphysically as well, please reach out in the links below.
Now, really interesting because I mentioned before that Scorpio is the ruler of sexuality. I think we're going to have some fun things to talk about today when we talk about medical astrology. Tell us about Scorpio.
Yes, you're quite right. It does rule sexuality, but it rules the sexual organs. So genitals, but also the lower part of the digestive tract. So things like the rectum, the anus, and then also the bladder and the colon. So it's like the ends of all of the stuff. So what you'll tend to see with Scorpio, as I say, is problems in those areas. So things like, for example, hemorrhoids, or problems with the colon, so colonitis, or sexual dysfunction is definitely a part of having a transit coming through Scorpio with a poor opposition to your chart, but also the tendency to repress emotions. And I mean, I think that is a difficult conversation to have right now in the environment that we have, where we've got all of the Epstein stuff going on, and like, okay, somebody needs to exercise some control. There's been no rules here, but then also we've got the other side of the coin, where we've lived through the age of sort of Victorianism, Christianity, where there's a lot of guilt over unusual expressions of sexuality, or even sexuality itself. And so that is ruled by Scorpio too. So my first oil that I would choose would be jasmine, because jasmine is so good for I hate the word frigid. I don't have another word, but I think it's just, somebody needs to like rip apart the patriarchy on that particular word. But being sort of sexually inhibited, unable to express one's sexuality, but also you talked about how they need a cooling element. It has that beautiful cooling element. And also I talked about how it is very good, that Scorpio can express itself through problems with the colon, and it is a specific for colonitis. So I think that everything about jasmine speaks to Scorpio. It's just like this beautiful sort of bringing through of deep, deep, deep sensuality, and allowing somebody to lean into it and just kind of feel into it without engaging it with the brain and all of the sort of cultural overloads that it can have.
It's really interesting, even in my lifetime, as you're talking about sexuality, I know generations before, it was kind of that time of free love and people were very liberal with their sexuality. I grew up in my 20s and so on in kind of the era of AIDS, where people were a bit more cautious about sexuality. And I notice in the generations now are very much more hesitant in their sexual expression, it seems, in that way. And I think jasmine might be a really nice one to bring in here, because jasmine is such a spiritual oil, and it takes it out of just that kind of sex for sex sake or pleasure's sake. And it's more about that deeper connection, which I think is really important and what Scorpio really yearns for in its pursuits as well. So I think jasmine is really great. Now, we've talked in the past about two types of jasmine: the general jasmine, or the common jasmine grandiflora, but there's also jasmine sambac. Do you have a preference here?
Well, my preference will always be sambac. I just think it's just like this deeper sexier resonance. But no, I don't think so. I think whichever one you can get your hands on is good.
I find sambac to be more sexual and the other to be more spiritual, but they both, like it's a Venn diagram and they cross over for sure. But yeah, really great, amazing. So
Yeah.
jasmine, and it blossoms at night, which obviously night darkness resonates with that Scorpio energy as well.
Yeah, I mean, it really makes me think of like going to India and going through all of the temples, and all of the temples are erotic, You're suddenly like, okay, this is so different to our Western way of thinking. That sort of, this is the sexual realm, and it's okay to be here. I love that. The next oil that I think is really good for Scorpios is vanilla. So a key aspect of their archetype is tears that are too deep to cry. And then we're going into that sort of repression of different emotions again. But I think that there's something about vanilla that just makes somebody feel comfortable in their own skin and braver to express themselves. And it's not necessarily an oil that we would talk about for the throat chakra per se, but I do think it's like, I feel comfortable to say what I want to say. I feel, and I mean, let's be honest, there's nothing cruel or spiteful about vanilla. It just is like Victoria's sponge. It just has this real gentle, nice, children, like almost like children's party feel to it, that sometimes Scorpios need to have the edges knocked off them. And I think that vanilla is a very good oil for that.
It's quite funny when we think about it that there is that term that someone who is vanilla is quite boring, but Scorpios are anything but boring, and they kind of dance around the darkness or the taboo. But no, I'd totally agree with you that vanilla would be a really great one for them for sure.
Vanilla needs a better press agent, because there's nothing boring about vanilla. I think it's one of the most beautiful fragrances that we have, but I agree, it does have that reputation. And so we talked about how they have this propensity to problems in the bottom. And so I think for anyone that has a propensity towards hemorrhoids and those sort of anal fissures and all of those sort of things, helichrysum is fantastic. Doesn't necessarily fit the psychological archetype, but in terms of like nuts and bolts of what might go on with your bottom, I was going to say body, but it came out bottom. Helichrysum's such a good healer, so good from a circulation point of view. So that would definitely be one of the ones that I would say, okay, I'm a Scorpio, I'm going to need that one in my box. Yeah.
I guess what if we wanted to kind of tie that up together, when you look at the helichrysum, also known as immortelle, it's a flower that when you pick it, it doesn't wilt, so it lives forever. So that immortality, mortality, dealing with death, that's very Scorpio. So I guess we could make a bit of a link there. But I find it really interesting talking about, that it rules the bladder and the rectum and the colon, because those are things to do with control. And, we want those when they're functioning properly, they hold on to things. We don't want them failing us in that way, but they all need to release. And ideally, we want that to be balanced in our body. And I guess really that's what Scorpio wants to do as well, is they want to be in control, but not in so much in control that it's suffocating or has a detrimental effect on them. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, I think that's really, really astute. Yeah, and that would be, I'd said earlier, I think that Yarrow is very good for this archetype, and I think from that point of view, it's very good at helping you to kind of loosen your grips on things. Yeah. There's sort of two more areas I want to speak to. So the first is that when you see sexual dysfunction, particularly in men, one of the best oils that you can use is one that's really quite controversial. So you need to look at the playlist and look at the safety. But this is nutmeg essential oil. Because obviously sexual dysfunction a long way down the track, it has relationships to stress, but also to trauma. And nutmeg is specific for supporting the pituitary gland, which is the gland that sends out different hormones for sexuality. So it's one that we would use in tiny amounts, but it does have, how you were talking about that with that warmth with black pepper. That to me, that's the same kind of feeling with nutmeg that I would definitely want to go to. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. It's not one I work a lot with, kind of thing, but I can definitely see how that would relate for sure.
Yeah. And then, so you talked about control. One of the things that I see quite a lot in my practice when people come to me is a condition called chronic pelvic pain syndrome. Have you ever come across that before?
No, I have. Is it abbreviated to CPS, I'm guessing? No, I don't think I have.
So chronic pelvic pain syndrome is difficult to treat under allopathic medicine. So that's the doctor's medicine, because it has so many sort of cross sections of things that are happening. So, for example, it affects the bowels, and so when somebody goes to the toilet, it's really painful. It affects the clitoris, so all of the nerves in the pelvis become hyper inflamed. And it affects the urine system. So even things like running can really make it really painful. And they have now isolated two things. They've said that, first of all, that it's cross-disciplinary. So one of the reasons that they've struggled to be able to treat it before is because somebody's gone to somebody who's an expert in urology, and then they've gone to an expert in whatever bottom care is, I don't know, and then gynecology. But actually, all of the three disciplines need to be speaking together. Then also, they've identified that it is extremely more prevalent in women that have experienced sexual trauma. And so therefore now they understand that there is also a emotional element to it. And I should also say that men suffer from it as well in large numbers, but far more women suffer from it. And it is almost universally has an emotional element to it. So again, I would use jasmine for that. So it pulls together all of the aspects of Scorpio in kind of one archetype. But so I treat it with jasmine, with Melissa, and with yarrow all together, and as a massage oil across the pelvis, across the back, and then also refer them for counselling as well. So that particular condition, you wouldn't find it in textbooks, but I think it really, really does speak to the Scorpio archetype. And that's me. I'm finished.
Amazing. You know what? Sometimes when we're talking about essential oils, and I'm sure you get this when you're talking or when you're writing, different oils pop into your head and go, "What about me? What about me?" There's one final one that I must admit I haven't got very little experience with, but it is something when I was writing my book that comes out later this year, Breathing with the Earth, that just kind of feels right for Scorpio. And I don't know how to justify it just yet. But tobacco, absolute. It's not one we commonly use in aromatherapy, but tobacco is used in North America as an offering plant, and it kind of we can work with the absolute as that kind of connecting with the divine as well. And I think just the smoky kind of atmosphere that tobacco would encapsulate kind of is that Scorpio type of energy as well, and that connection to the occult or the spiritual, which is definitely a scorpionic energy as well. So I'm just going to throw that one in there. I don't have much evidence behind it. Tobacco just came into my head and said, "Hey, you need to mention me today." So there you go, tobacco. I did my job.
I know nothing about tobacco at all. Is it an essential oil or a CO2 or an absolute?
And CO2 or an absolute. Yeah, you won't get an essential oil out of it, but yes, it's obviously got that real smoky kind of tobacco-esque kind of aroma.
Yeah, I definitely think it has like an underworld feel to it, doesn't it? I think that's a good call.
Yep, there we go. I didn't have that on my list of ones to talk about today, but it came on through. That's the joy of working with the oils in this kind of way. Well, that's Scorpio. Hopefully we went deep enough, and hopefully we have not betrayed your trust, Scorpios, and we've done a good job. We'll be back next week to explore another sign of the Zodiac. Until then, take care and blessed be.
I'm
Bye-bye.
Elizabeth Ashley, UK Director for the National Association of Holistic Aromatherapy and founder of the Aromatic Mystery School, where essential oils meet the deeper, more mystical side of healing. Here you'll explore the spiritual, emotional and energetic dimensions of plants and learn how to weave them into your own rituals and well-being practices. If you're ready to work in a way that nourishes both your soul and your senses, join us at the Aromatic Mystery School. The link's right below.